Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. I sat there, frozen, feeling cornered as my wife of 25 years went over why she was serving me divorce papers. I could hardly keep up with her words. They seemed to blur together. Noticing my distraction, she asked if I was actually listening. I apologized, admitting I'd zoned out for a moment. She repeated the terms, clear and non-negotiable, stressing that I would keep the house, the cars, and every cent in our joint accounts. She urged me to sign, assuring me that everything would be finalized in 3 months. Speechless, I thought back on our life together. Riley and I had been side by side since high school, raising our twin daughters, Alice and Rachel, who eventually left for Columbia University. We built a snug home in an Alabama suburb, drove matching Subarus, and Riley always had her own credit cards and phone. I never denied her anything. I was faithful, always treating her with respect, and she'd never expressed any unhappiness. This came out of nowhere. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I'd taken things for granted. I understand how divorce works, Riley, I managed to say, but can you at least tell me why? It's probably too late to change things, but I need to understand. Riley slouched into one of the kitchen chairs, clearly not eager to hash it out, hoping I'd just sign and let it be. Come on, Riley. Give me something. What did I do? You didn't do anything, Brandon. You were perfect. Sometimes I'd almost wished you'd slip up, so I'd have a reason to go. But you never did. You were a great father, you worked hard to get the girls through college, and you always provided what I wanted. You gave me a nice home. Even my parents adored you. Don't think this is your fault, because it's not. Riley looked like she hadn't aged a day over 45, her skin smooth, her light brown hair styled, and gleaming in the afternoon light. She jogged regularly, keeping herself toned and tan. She dressed simply most days, but knew how to glam up when she wanted to. Riley seemed just as perfect as me. At least, that's what she always said. But here we were, and I couldn't make sense of it. This doesn't add up, I said. You can't just shrug this off like it's nothing. Riley glanced away, folding her arms. There's more to it, Brandon. I was hoping not to hurt you. Let's leave it at that. More to it, Riley. What's really going on? She finally met my gaze. I found someone else. He's a real estate developer with a sleek place overlooking the river and drives a shiny BMW. He's charming, successful, and absolutely smitten with me. You've always been, well, a grocery store manager, Brandon. Not to diminish your work, you've always provided, and we've lived comfortably. But that's all you ever wanted to be, a manager. Her words stung. I have the chance to move up, relocate, even leave town. But I turned it down to keep our family together. And now this. So, what's this guy's name? She swallowed before responding. Derek Grant. He's the CEO of Riverfront Development Group. How long have you been seeing him? 6 months. She sat up straighter, her eyes scanning the kitchen, almost anywhere but at me. Finally, her gaze fixed on mine. Yes, Brandon, if you really need to hear it. I've been with him. I cheated on you while we were still married. There it is. I sat in silence for a moment, then reached for the divorce papers. I signed in 3 spots, initiated 2, and slid them across the table. I guess Derek's a better fit for you. Sorry, I didn't measure up. As I got up to leave, Riley called out. No, Brandon, that's not it. He isn't better than you, just different. Don't you dare think otherwise. But I was already out the door. I'd been so caught up in work and my hobbies that I hadn't noticed Riley moving her things out of the house, bit by bit. By the time she handed me the papers, most of her clothes and belongings were gone, likely stashed in Derek's place. She left all the wedding and family photos behind, as if for me to look at when she wasn't there. When I got home that night, Riley was gone for good. Her Subaru was still parked out front, which I figured she didn't need anymore. On the kitchen counter, I found a power of attorney for selling the house and car. I spent that night finishing off the last of the beer in the fridge, realizing this was the end. And honestly, I didn't want to turn back. Riley was out of my life. And that was that. The next morning, I called into work and took a 3-month vacation. I'd put it off for years, so they had no problem letting me go. Between vacation days and sick leave, I was covered. I reached out to our daughters at school, gave them a brief explanation that Riley and I were separating, but I didn't get into the details. They wanted to reach out to her, but I no longer had her new number. With a clear 3 months ahead to sort my thoughts and next steps, I cut off my landline, changed my cell number, and canceled Riley's line as well. I had her Subaru appraised, and it wasn't worth much, but I'd deal with that later. Then I contacted Max, an old friend from high school who was now a real estate agent. He agreed to help sell the house quickly at a fair price. I canceled all joint credit cards, opened new bank accounts, and cashed in some life insurance policies. It was time to set things straight. I gathered anything in the house that belonged to Riley, filling 3 trash bags with her stuff. I boxed up the girls' things and stored them neatly in the closet. For 3 hours, I went through family photos, saving pictures of the girls for them, but tossing all the ones of Riley. Maybe it was a little petty, but I didn't care. The main issue left was figuring out what to do after those 3 months. Would I stay here or move on? Would I keep working or try something new? I had 2 hobbies that kept me sane. I collected coins, especially Indian head pennies, buying and selling them on eBay. My other passion was geocaching. It got me outdoors, gave me some exercise. Riley had never liked it. Ticks, poison ivy, and walking weren't her idea of fun. When I wasn't lost in my hobbies, I spent time reading the Wall Street Journal. Every Christmas, Alice and Rachel renewed my subscription. I wasn't into stocks or bonds, but I kept up with all things related to farm commodities. I knew more about wheat, corn, and sugar than most market analysts, but it was just a hobby. I wasn't invested in it. I dug into riverfront development and direct grant. My friend Max found out more about Derek's newest project than I could have alone. He even had a contact at a local bank to gather some intel. I waited, weeks passing without any word from Riley. The girls called each week, but their moms stayed quiet. They supported me, but they still had a bond with her. In the meantime, I held a few yard sales, clearing out stuff I didn't need, leaving only enough to keep the house looking presentable. One Sunday, I spotted a photo of Riley and Derek in the society section of the local paper, attending a fundraiser with the city's upper crust. A few weeks later, Max called with a lowball offer on the house, far below its appraisal, but with a quick 60-day close, which suited me. He also mentioned some interesting info about Derek, suggesting we meet up for lunch. I figured a change of scenery couldn't hurt, so I agreed. Hayes Ridge was the perfect place for hiking and geocaching. Though I'd already found all the caches there, a few hidden landmarks still eluded me. These landmarks, metal rods and concrete, helped surveyors mark property lines. Finding them felt like a little extra prize. That day, I decided to track down the remaining landmarks. Armed with my GPS and metal detector, I made my way to Hayes Ridge. The area, covering nearly 2,000 acres, was mostly under the management of the Alamance Land Trust, which relied on donations to preserve the landscape from expanding urban sprawl. A nearby orchard and farmhouse had a big for sale sign, which caught my eye. As I approached the orchard, an elderly man walked up, dressed in overalls and a John Deere cap. "Thinking of buying it?" he asked. "We're just enjoying the view." I chuckled. If I had $1 million, I'd buy it in a heartbeat. He grinned. "Think it'll sell fast?" "I got a few interested parties, but I'm holding off as long as I can," I said. "Why's that?" "I'm hoping the land trust can pull together an offer," he explained. "I'd like to keep these orchards untouched, but the developers want to clear it all. I've even offered it to them for $600,000, but they're struggling to scrape together the funds. I nodded. It'd be a real loss to see it developed. He sighed. Those developers have been circling like vultures. One's got an option, a guy named Direct Grant. He's put down $100,000. But if he can't buy the land later, he'll lose it. Great deal for me, but I'd rather he fails. What if you don't sell? I asked. He laughed. If he doesn't get this property, the whole project falls apart, and he'll be out millions. It'd serve him right. We shared a laugh, and I set off on my hike, with Direct's name lingering in my mind. The landmarks were about a mile apart, as the crow flies, but on that mountain, it felt like a whole lot further. Finding the first 2 survey markers was simple enough. They were standard surveying rods, easy to spot. But that third one was a challenge. It was much older, hidden under layers of forest debris, taking time and persistence to unearth. Finally, I uncovered a small brick monument with a bronze plaque attached, buried beneath years of leaves and dirt. I took a quick picture, thinking it might make an interesting story for a local magazine, and then things took a turn. As I moved away from the marker, my metal detector gave a soft peep. Faint but unmistakable. I slipped on my headphones and began carefully scanning the area. A few minutes of digging revealed a small iron box, wrapped tightly in oil-soaked canvas. It was rusty but solid, with a heavy bronze lock. Normally, when you find something like this on public land, you're supposed to hand it over. But this time, I didn't feel like following that rule. So I slid the box into my bag and headed home, curiosity gnawing at me. On the drive back, I couldn't help but wonder what treasures might be inside. Gold coins, Civil War documents. The possibilities ran wild in my mind, limited only by the box's small size. Once home, I cleared off the kitchen table and inspected my find carefully. Reluctant to break the lock but finding no other option, I used my bolt cutter. Inside, nestled under a final layer of oiled canvas, were a dozen pennies, large cents from as far back as 1793, all in remarkable condition, free of corrosion. Though I usually preferred Indian head pennies, I remembered an old book my grandfather had left me, titled The Mysteries of the Penny, which discussed various types and grades of large cents. I had once found a dull one, not having any of those coins to my name. But tonight, it would finally come in handy. I spent the night leafing through it, comparing each penny with a magnifying glass, taking detailed scans to capture every detail. After a few hours of sleep, I woke up, still buzzing with excitement. I called into work and learned that Stephen Wallace, one of the higher-ups, had been asking about me. But I brushed it off. I had more pressing matters now. My first task was securing a safe deposit box at the bank. After hours of online research, I realized my pennies weren't just old. They were rare, with values running into the millions, thanks to their condition and specific stamps. I started to understand why people go to such lengths to launder money. It wouldn't be easy to convert these coins into cash. Over breakfast at IAOP, I glanced at the newspaper, seeing yet another photo of Riley with Durek, this time at an art gallery opening. That reminded me of my next move. Once my safe deposit box was set up, I reached out to John Smart, asking him to hold off on any property deals for a few days, and he agreed. I followed up with the local land trust, exploring a potential donation, and they were enthusiastic. With the divorce finalizing in just a month, I felt a sense of urgency to act. The rest of my day was spent researching reputable coin dealers and auction houses. Eventually, I settled on Adams & Burns in New York City. They had a reputation for handling unique transactions discreetly, which was what I needed. I set up an appointment for Monday afternoon, arranging to have lunch with my daughters that morning. When I arrived at Adams & Burns, I was struck by the sophisticated, modern atmosphere. After I gave my name, they led me to a more private area. "Welcome to New York, Mr. Atkinson. I hear you've got some interesting coins to show us." First time in the city. Leo Adams, the owner, greeted me. I recognized him from advertisements, though he looked a bit older in person. I took a seat across from him. Thanks. My daughters are students at Columbia University, so I've been here before, but never on business. I figured I'd start the meeting on the right foot. I'm sure you know your way around coins, but do you have a specialist on early copper coins? It might be helpful. Leo nodded, pressing a button on the intercom. Mark, could you bring Smith to the office? Mark Smith, famous for his large cent guides, soon joined us. He looked a bit older than his photos, but still sharp. I've got 12 coins to sell, I explained. I'd like to sell 4 today and keep one as a placeholder. The rest, we'll see. If things go smoothly, I'll offer the others later. 6 of these could easily qualify for census-level grading, but I'd leave that to your expert. Where did these coins come from? Leo asked. They were a gift from my grandfather when he passed, I replied, keeping things simple. Leo looked skeptical, but nodded. May we see them? I laid out enlarged photos of 4 coins, showing both sides. Leo and Mark examined each one closely. So, what's your asking price? Leo asked after some silence. $1 million wouldn't be out of line, considering their rarity, I replied, recalling recent auction figures. I'd say $800,000 for the set, Leo countered. But there's a catch. What kind of catch? I asked. I reached into my bag, handing him a letter from the land trust and a flyer for John Smart's orchard sale. I'd like you to buy this land and donate it to the Alamance Land Trust. It's priced at $600,000. You'll get a big tax write-off, and good karma to boot. Leo and Mark exchanged glances, huddled briefly. Then Mark left the room. A few minutes later, Leo asked, Do you have the coins with you? I nodded. In a 5th I'd like to keep in the mix. Mark returned with a bag labeled Crown Royal, which held nearly 100 coins, mostly gold with a few silver pieces. We're in, he said, as long as you honor the land deal as agreed. After a pause, I handed over the 4 coins, and we shook on it. So, what's this 5th coin? Leo asked. I showed him the photo of a pristine 1793 strawberry scent, describing it as one of the finest I'd seen. Both Leo and Mark were visibly intrigued. Care for some coffee, Mr. Atkinson? Asked Adelaide Langley, a striking woman who had just entered. Black is fine, thanks. She and Leo left the room, returning 30 minutes later. Adelaide introduced herself and asked if I had a passport. When I confirmed, she explained we'd be flying to JFK shortly to open an offshore account for me. She requested I hand over the strawberry scent, which Leo examined excitedly before leaving the room. Soon, Adelaide and I found ourselves on a flight bound for the Cayman Islands. The first-class experience was a first for me, and it felt like no time had passed. Adelaide, with her effortlessly stylish tan and charm, drew attention as we landed. I couldn't help but notice how easily she slipped into the driver's seat of a yellowed SUV, her confidence unshakable. She glanced my way, seeming amused by my reaction to her presence. After a short drive, we arrived at her mid-sized condo complex. She owned the entire building but lived on the top floor, where she invited me to join her on a small ocean view balcony. You're not much of a talker, Mr. Atkinson, she said, eyeing me with a smile. No questions. I chuckled, feeling oddly at ease. I'm just surprised to see someone like you drinking beer from a bottle. I pictured champagne or something. She laughed. I suppose you're wondering why we had to come all the way here to set up an account. Something like that, I replied. It's simple, she explained. It's secure, and it'll serve you well. We moved back inside, away from the breeze, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie with her. You know, Mr. Atkinson, I brought you here to just be myself for a few days. Her sudden comment caught me off guard, but we both laughed. Trust me, I replied, teasing an old man won't do you much good. Let's go get some fresh lobsters for dinner, she said, grinning as she opened the door. The restaurant was outstanding. though the wine didn't sit well with me. She noticed my reaction. Not a wine person. Just a bad memory of cheap white wine from when I was young, I explained. Later, as we shared key lime pie and coffee, she grew curious. Tell me about yourself, Mr. Atkinson. Married? Kids? I laughed. Well, I have 2 daughters studying at Columbia University. They're both into something with international banking. I just pay the bills. I shrugged, feeling slightly self-conscious. Interesting, she replied thoughtfully. I actually hold a master's from Columbia University and lecture there every so often. I think I might have met both of your daughters. Oh, did you see them today? I asked. We had lunch together, she replied. She's not too happy when I make them skip class, I said with a grin. You must have married young if you've got 2 daughters in college, she noted. Guess that does sound a bit like a line out of a movie, I laughed. Sitting there with this striking Mediterranean woman, I felt like I could talk with her for hours. As for me, I said after a pause, I'm separated right now. Strange to even say it out loud. I admitted, the word still tasting unfamiliar. My wife left me for some flashy businessman, likely building malls or corporate parks from the look of his apartment and car. She's moving on, and the divorce will be final in about 4 weeks. That's a flimsy reason to break up a good marriage, she said, her tone carrying a hint of sympathy. I thought so too. I sighed. For years, I thought we were happy. But she never quite accepted my career choice, even though I tried to go further for her sake. I had opportunities to advance, but when push came to shove, I stayed put for the family's sake. And now, well, here I am. I shifted the conversation to, what about you? I asked, turning the focus back toward her. There was a short pause. It's not every day you confess to a beautiful, successful woman that you manage a grocery store. She must have sensed my hesitation. It's no big deal, she reassured, noticing my discomfort. We can talk about that later. No, really, it's fine. I'm not embarrassed by my work, I replied. Managing a grocery store doesn't sound glamorous, though. My daughters don't mind, but my wife often found ways to leave that detail out in conversations. She looked at me thoughtfully. Do you find satisfaction in it? She asked, as a server brought fresh coffee and cleared our plates. I do, actually. I've gotten pretty good at it over the years, I said with quiet pride. Mr. Atkinson, I know we just met, but first impressions are often worth something. So, what's your impression of me? She asked. Her question put me in a bit of a bind. If I spoke my honest thoughts, I risked putting her off. But if I tried to flatter her, she'd see right through it. Well, I began, choosing my words carefully. I'd say you're intelligent, confident, and beautiful. Educated, too. She smirked, tilting her head slightly and looking up at me from under her lashes. Was hoping for something honest, she confessed. Apologies if that wasn't enough. I just didn't want to ruin a nice evening, I replied. Do you really hold such a low opinion of me? She asked, her tone turning serious. Maybe that's why your wife left. If you hadn't always tried to keep her happy, your marriage might have been stronger. Her words stung, though I had to admit they weren't entirely without merit. You know, you use your charm well. I'd even say you have a way of getting what you want and don't like being told no. You're used to success, and maybe even a bit entitled. I sense you know your way around finances too, I said, somewhat annoyed by her earlier comment. And if you weren't so determined to prove yourself every man's equal, you might actually make a good mother. She looked at me, silent for a moment, before a small smile appeared on her face. Do you really think I'd make a good mother? She asked, her tone softening. As we drove back to our condo, the tension between us faded. That night turned out to be uneventful, as we each retired to our own rooms, which was just as well. I hadn't expected anything more. The following morning, I woke to find breakfast waiting, along with a copy of the Wall Street Journal. Stepping onto the balcony, I noted that the wind had finally died down. About 20 minutes later, Adelaide joined me, casually grabbing a section of the paper. We sat in quiet comfort, reading and sipping coffee, as if this was a routine we'd shared for years. Despite having just met, there was a natural ease between us. "Oh, my phone doesn't seem to work here, and I wanted to call my daughters," I said after a moment. Adelaide offered me hers, saying it was fine for me to use it. I dialed Alice's number, and when she picked up, I asked where she was and if everything was all right. She mentioned she was in the Cayman Islands, visiting a friend, and had to use her friend's phone since hers was having issues. Trying to make light of things, I brought up that I'd seen her on TV, boarding a plane with Adelaide Langley, and asked what was going on. Alice seemed unfazed, explaining that Adelaide was the friend she'd mentioned and wondered why it was a big deal. I cautioned her, saying Adelaide was known for her business smarts and that she might be ruthless. Just then, Adelaide walked by with the breakfast tray. I introduced her to Alice, mentioning that she was my daughter. When Alice realized who she was talking to, I could hear her and her sister murmuring in the background. "What? You're with her? Why? Are you coming back home soon?" Alice fired off questions before I could respond. Adelaide reached for the phone with a warm smile. "Hi, Alice, it's Adelaide. Your dad told me about you and your sister. I'll be in New York tomorrow, and would love to have lunch with you both. How about it?" Handing the phone back to me, Adelaide chuckled. "Your daughter said goodbye. Looks like we're on for lunch tomorrow. I'll be sure to play nice and keep the shark talk to a minimum." Later that morning, we visited the Federal Reserve Bank of the Cayman Islands, where Adelaide assisted me in opening my first offshore bank account. A few minutes later, I saw the account balance for $1 million, transferred from Adams and Burns. It seemed like a fair price for a modest 215 pennies. Afterward, Adelaide arranged for a friend to take us out to feed manta rays. Over dinner, I asked her about her work at Adams and Burns, and that's when she revealed she owned a 60% stake in the company. "So, what else should I know about you?" I asked, feeling a bit embarrassed about my lack of knowledge on the matter. She leaned back, offering a small smile. "I was born in London. My father's Lebanese and my mother's Turkish. I have an MBA from Columbia University. Like I mentioned, I've been engaged twice but haven't been in a serious relationship in over 3 years. I guess I've learned to be cautious about men who take an interest in me." "That's too bad," I said, feeling a pang of sympathy. "Does that mean you don't trust me?" I teased. She laughed. "Well, I don't have a choice, do I?" I apologized, realizing I'd made things awkward. She just shook her head. "Don't worry about it, Mr. Atkinson. We have a party to attend later, so save your serious talk for then." The evening led us to a cocktail party at a posh hotel, where Adelaide was treated like royalty. Meanwhile, I blended into the crowd, feeling out of place in my casual New York attire. Initially, Adelaide stayed by my side, but I encouraged her to mingle, and she eventually slipped into the crowd, though she kept an eye on me now and then. I ended up in conversation with a couple of gentlemen from Argentina, cattle ranchers by trade. Our chat started with soccer and drifted into fishing, which was manageable. But then one of them, Paulino Jordan, brought up his plans to invest in winter wheat, and I had no idea how to respond. "Mr. Atkinson, I can see by your face you're not quite sold on the winter wheat idea," Paulino said, laughing. Caught off guard, I quickly admitted, "I don't know much about investing. This is all a bit over my head." I attempted to steer the conversation into simpler territory, but Paulino pressed on. "Still, I feel like you've got something to say," he persisted. Before I could come up with a good response, Adelaide came to my rescue, guiding me away from the intense talk. As we walked away, she raised an eyebrow. "What was that all about?" "Oh, just some talk about food and groceries," I joked, grateful for her timely intervention. The next morning, we flew back to New York, where Adelaide was greeted by a small crowd of photographers. A courier from Adams and Burns handed me a package containing the coins I'd left with them. After bidding Adelaide farewell, I made my way to the train station to head back to Huntsville. Back home, the divorce proceedings and house sale moved forward smoothly. Stephen Wallace from the main office left me several messages, urging me to consider relocating to the New York headquarters. This time, I agreed. Meanwhile, John Smart also reached out, asking to meet for lunch. At work, I cleared out my locker, saying goodbye to my colleagues as I prepared for the move. Scanning the newspaper, I noticed a picture of Derek and Riley at a local political barbecue, looking every bit like the perfect couple. With a few weeks left before I left town, I spent an entire day organizing and listing the coins I brought back from New York on eBay, hoping for a smooth sale. All payments funneled directly into my PayPal account and then to my offshore bank. With the weekend free, I took a breather. My Friday lunch with John was productive. He seemed glad Derek was involved in the property deal, but wasn't too pleased that I didn't profit more from it. As we wrapped up, he surprised me by handing me the deeds to 5 acres on the outskirts of town, a reward of sorts for my goodwill. Shortly after saying goodbye to John, my phone buzzed. Alice and Rachel were landing in Nashville in a couple of hours, so I had time to get there. They'd chosen Nashville over Huntsville to save on airfare. Meeting them at the airport, Alice couldn't wait to share her latest adventure. The lecture hall was packed with over 300 students for an advanced corporate finance class. Partway through, the professor paused and introduced Adelaide to the room. She came in confidently, and after a 10-minute talk, invited a couple of students to lunch at the Western Hotel. We were stunned when she called out our names in front of everyone. "So, what did you two think of her?" I asked as we headed down the road. "She's incredible, Dad. How on earth did you end up meeting someone like her?" Alice exclaimed, still awestruck. "Well, she mentioned she needed a personal assistant, and I just happened to fit the job description," I joked, earning a disapproving nudge from Rachel. "Dad, that's not funny. Be serious," she scolded. All right, I said, steering the conversation back. "So, what did you guys chat about over lunch?" "She was interested in our classes and coursework," Rachel replied with a chuckle. "And she kept asking about you, Dad. It was like she's interested in more than just a friendship with you," Alice added with a sly grin. "But why you, Dad?" Rachel wondered, furrowing her brows. "I mean, from where we stand, you're a great guy, but Adelaide Langley could probably have her pick of anyone she wants." "Exactly. I mean, you're our dad, but even Mom didn't always seem to understand you all that well," Alice added, her tone shifting to something more thoughtful. The air grew thick after Alice's words, and I regretted anything that might have cast their mother in a negative light. I hadn't meant to put them in a tough spot, or to stir anything up. "Hey, your mom's a wonderful person, and I shouldn't have implied otherwise," I apologized. "Don't worry, Dad. We get it," Alice assured me with a soft smile, helping to ease the tension. We rode along in silence for a bit, until Rachel's phone suddenly rang as we crossed into Alabama. "Hey. Yeah, we got here about an hour ago." "That's amazing news. I'll let him know. Thanks for calling. Bye." Rachel ended the call with a big grin, exchanging a quick thumbs up with Alice. "What's that about?" I asked, curious. Rachel leaned forward. "Guess what, Dad? Adelaide's coming to Huntsville on Tuesday. She wants you to cover her stay. And she's expecting breakfast in bed," she announced, her eyes gleaming with mischief. The news was flattering, but it also came with a healthy dose of pressure. Between Adelaide and now my daughters, I felt like I had a lot riding on this. The weekend with the girls was nice and relaxed. They spent Saturday afternoon visiting their mom, but apparently Derek wasn't around. I asked them to keep Adelaide's visit a secret from their mom, and they promised to help keep things discreet. We went through the belongings they planned to leave behind, and by the time they were ready to leave, everything was sorted out. As I drove them back to Nashville, I made a small request. They made me swear to try and keep on Adelaide's good side. Just don't get on her nerves, Dad, Alice teased, both of them laughing. They were happy about my move to New York, but I was still in the dark about why Adelaide had taken an interest in someone like me. I didn't even own a suit that was halfway stylish. Back at home, I settled down with a beer and the Sunday paper. No new photos of Riley and Derek, thankfully. But I did spot a short note about riverfront development running into some financing trouble. Winter wheat futures were in freefall, which sparked my curiosity. I called up Max, my old friend, and invited him over. Nothing fancy, a couple of cold ones, and some catching up was all I had in mind. We got to talking about Derek. It turned out he had a pretty checkered past, a wild back and forth between wealth and debt, with creditors and past friends often left hanging. His latest project was unraveling, and the folks backing him seemed to be backing away. I'll say, beer had never tasted so satisfying. Monday turned out better than I could have hoped. The coins I'd listed on auction fetched a price higher than I'd anticipated, with an appraised value of around $300,000. I hadn't expected much, maybe just enough to hit $200,000, but the sale had exceeded all expectations. It was strange how, just 3 months ago, the thought of all this would have felt like a nightmare. But now I found myself looking forward to the future. The buyers for the house had wrapped up their financing, and we were on track to close the deal. It struck me as amusing how easily Riley had moved in with Derek, leaving behind all the things we'd shared over the years. I wondered if she realized how shaky her new situation might be. That afternoon, I had a meeting with the buyers. They handed over a check for $200,000, which I promptly deposited into my offshore account. They were fine with me staying in the house for another week, which suited both sides well. The next morning, even before my first cup of coffee, I received a call from an unknown number. A voice on the line informed me that Ms. Langley would be landing at 10:44 a.m. on Delta Flight 724. I showed up 30 minutes early, feeling unexpectedly nervous. The local paparazzi must have caught wind of her arrival, as a small group of photographers was already outside the terminal. I tried to keep a low profile, parking in short-term parking, hoping to avoid all the fuss. But Adelaide, instead of waiting for me to meet her, chose to walk beside me, which only drew the photographers' attention. Naturally, they got a clear shot of my license plate, so there went our little secret. I wasn't used to this sort of attention, but Adelaide seemed entirely unfazed, even apologizing on my behalf. On the way home, I couldn't help but think back to her stepping off the plane. I'd had this sudden, ridiculous urge to kiss her, a silly thought for an old guy like me, no doubt. The house felt embarrassingly empty as we walked in. Over the past few months, I'd gotten rid of almost everything, leaving only the essentials that the new owners had agreed to keep. I tried apologizing for the sparse surroundings, but Adelaide found my embarrassment more amusing than anything. With nothing to eat in the house, we swung by Taco Bell for a quick bite, her choice, surprisingly. I promised her we'd have some of Dreamland's famous ribs for dinner later. It was refreshing to be around the woman who didn't shy away from a good meal. So, I have to ask, Adelaide, why are you here? I figured she'd be back to her routine by now, I said, a bit bewildered. With a little laugh, she explained that it was part business. She'd heard about my upcoming move to New York and offered her spare room for me to stay in while I got settled. She even arranged a moving truck to help with my things. When I asked how she knew about my plans, she just shrugged and said she had a knack for noticing details. Jokingly, I teased her about being in cahoots with my daughters, though I admitted I wasn't exactly hard to read. Her offer had caught me off guard, but it was generous, and I couldn't come up with a reason to say no. We started packing up the rest of my things. Surprisingly, Adelaide seemed perfectly comfortable here, sorting through the clutter with me, not at all the polished businesswoman I'd expected. As we worked, I still felt a bit self-conscious about the age gap between us. She had strong opinions on my wardrobe, hardly budging even when I'd begged her to go easy on my old clothes. She promised we'd go shopping for new attire once I got to New York. By the time we finished packing, we had more boxes than my car could handle, though not quite enough to fill a moving van. I set aside my laptop and a little inkjet printer to keep tabs on an eBay auction, figuring they'd come in handy during the transition. We were just about to sit down for dinner when a delivery van pulled up in front of the house. Adelaide and I exchanged glances as the driver, dressed sharply, hopped out and walked up with a clipboard in hand. "Are you Brandon Atkinson?" he asked, checking his notes. "I have a delivery for you. Where would you like it?" "What in the world?" I muttered, completely puzzled. "It's from Mr. Paulino Jordan," the driver explained. "Can we put it in the garage?" I pointed to the empty spot where Riley's old Subaru used to sit, and the driver nodded, heading off to unload. I glanced over at Adelaide, who had a hand over her mouth, stifling a laugh. Adelaide seemed to find my confusion highly entertaining. About 5 minutes later, I found myself face to face with a sleek orange sports car parked beside my old Subaru. "What on earth is this?" I asked, feeling a strange mix of pride and shock. The courier, beaming, replied, "This right here is a 2028 Lamborghini Gallardo Spider Superleggera. Quite beautiful, isn't she?" Adelaide couldn't hold back her laughter, though she kept things low-key, clearly enjoying every second of my bewilderment. I signed off on the delivery, watching the sharply dressed courier stride back to his truck. I had no idea what I was going to do with this flashy new gift, but one thing was clear. I wasn't hauling it all the way to New York. Miss Funnypants could keep her fancy wheels. As we drove off with her still smiling, I ordered a full rack of ribs and a couple of beers. "All right, want to fill me in on what's going on with the car?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Paulino's big on winter wheat," she explained. "Everyone thought he'd lost it when prices tanked, but he doubled down on his contracts. Within a week, he made over $40 million. He was thrilled with the money, but the praise for his sharp move made him even happier." "Well, good for Paulino. Hope he didn't mention me," I replied, shaking my head. She chuckled. "He did want to give you some credit, but only if you were okay with it. He's grateful I brought you to that party, so he asked for your address. Didn't realize he had this in mind, though." As the ribs arrived, I watched Adelaide dunk a few into some extra Tabasco sauce before diving in. I had to admit, I was smitten with her. "You know I'll be sending this back tomorrow, right?" I asked, nodding toward the Lamborghini. "That's why I figured," she said with a smile. "No worries, Paulino won't be offended. He probably figured you'd feel obliged to keep it. If he'd offer cash, you might have declined outright." We ended up ordering a few extra beers, thanks to all that hot sauce. I felt good, so good that I didn't want the night to end. In moments like these, I envied those smooth guys who could charm a woman into bed in a heartbeat. Me, I'd have been happy just to get a goodnight kiss. Eventually, we had to call it a night. The next morning turned out even better than I could have hoped. All my worries had been for nothing. Once we were back at the house, Adelaide surprised me by taking my hand and leading me to the bedroom. And being the gentleman I am, I made sure to put her needs first. It was the best night of my life, tucked away in our own world. The next morning's breakfast was simple: juice, coffee, and a Danish. "Sorry, it's the best I can do for now," I apologized. "It's perfect," she assured me, though eating from a tray in bed wasn't exactly comfortable. After a few laughs and some shifting around, we ended up in the kitchen. Breakfast in bed sounds a lot fancier than it really is, I joked, trying not to spoil the moment. "But honestly, Adelaide, I'm curious. Why me? I don't have much to offer, and someone like you deserves the best." She looked at me seriously. "I've had my fill of smooth-talking men, Brandon. I'm not falling for that again." "Ah, I get it. You're into me because I'm not a player or an idiot," I replied, making her laugh. "Actually, I was impressed with the deal you struck with Leo in New York," she added. "Sold a few coins, that's all." I shrugged. No, it was more than that, she said, her eyes twinkling. Your plan to secure trust land was pretty clever. Me, a philanthropist. Nah, I smirked. More like a guy who took advantage of a unique situation to stick it to his wife's new lover. She laughed, and I couldn't help but grin along with her. Her intelligence and insight took me by surprise. She'd hidden it well. Was that a bad move on my part? I asked. No, Brandon, that was genius, she said, clearly impressed. She was curious to learn more about me, and that felt good. You had no idea what I was up to in New York, I protested. True, but I found out eventually, she admitted. And you were keeping tabs on me too, weren't you? I couldn't deny it, and the boost to my self-confidence felt great. Unfortunately, Adelaide had an early morning flight back to New York. Saying goodbye was tougher than I expected, but she left me with a sense of contentment and even entrusted me with the key to her apartment. The dealer couldn't pick up the Lamborghini until the next day, but that didn't matter. I had no plans of driving it anywhere. Miss Funnypants could keep her fancy wheels. As the movers arrived with a small truck to take my belongings to New York, just as I was wrapping things up, Max called with some concerning news. Riverfront Development was in financial turmoil, and Derek had lost nearly all his backers overnight. Rumors were even spreading about missing funds. That evening, Riley stopped by unexpectedly. To whom do I owe this surprise? I asked. I need to discuss a few things, she replied. I'm leaving in a few days, but I'll help however I can, I said. Noticing the missing Subaru, she pointed to the orange sports car in the garage. What's that? She asked. Sold the Subaru back to the dealer after you said you didn't want it, I explained. As for the orange car, it's a gift. I'm sending it back tomorrow. She seemed caught off guard by the whole scene, especially the Lamborghini. She speculated, wondering if it was a gift from my new girlfriend. No, it's from a cattle rancher I helped out, I clarified. Her expression shifted, and she hesitated. So, about the money from the house sale. It's all gone, I replied simply. You didn't want any of it, so I used it to set up my new place in New York. Riley looked puzzled but seemed to accept my answer. When she asked where I'd be living, I mentioned the move to New York for a new job with a decent raise. I didn't feel the need to mention I'd be staying with Adelaide or that I had a bank account in the Caymans now. Where are you living now? She continued. We're at the Holiday Inn until Derek finds us a new place, I explained. Now I get it, I said, understanding why Riley had wanted to move back into our old house. She seemed a bit confused, but I didn't press her on it. Anything else I can help you with, Riley? She asked. She hesitated once more, finally asking, could you give me a ride to the Holiday Inn? The drive started quietly enough, but soon she brought up Adelaide. So tell me about her, she pressed. Not exactly a girlfriend, more of a business partner, I replied, trying to keep it casual. What kind of business? She probed. Not that kind. I'm still just a grocery manager, Riley. She looked out the window, muttering something under her breath. In that moment, I had the perfect chance to vent all the hurt those pictures of her and Derek had caused me. But instead, I kept quiet, smiling inwardly as I watched her, a bit of regret flickering inside me. Still, as I dropped her off at the motel, she left without a backward glance or even a goodbye. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and regret all at once. Thursday morning brought another surprise. The final divorce papers arrived, a bit sooner than expected. No complaints here. The Huntsville paper ran a front-page photo of Adelaide's arrival at the airport. Since every room at the Holiday Inn gets a complimentary newspaper, Riley would surely see it over breakfast. I emptied my safe deposit box at the bank, prepared for the next steps. My remaining coins were a solid safety net, though Adelaide never once brought them up. All our talks had been casual, social, not business-oriented. Now, I was following up on auction results for the coins, most of which sold at excellent prices. I spent the rest of the day packaging them up for shipment, aiming to have everything ready by noon on Friday. Any buyers with dodgy payment methods would have to wait until early Saturday when I had hit the road. Most of the money from PayPal went straight to my Cayman account, though I kept a bit behind just in case I felt like an impulse buy. Just as I was preparing to leave, the new owners of the house arrived, marking a win-win conclusion to the deal for both sides. The drive north would take around 12 hours, assuming no delays. Adelaide would be waiting at the apartment, promising to cook a homemade dinner for my arrival. I chuckled to myself, wondering if she'd be the one actually cooking. Crossing into Virginia on Interstate 81, my phone rang. Alice was calling. It turned out that Derek had skipped town, leaving Riley stranded without a car or a place to stay. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.